let's talk about a shamanic take on the COVID pandemic, the pandemic that has been going on for 2 years, over 2 years now, hasn't quite left us yet, although many people are acting like it is. But let's talk about a shamanic viewpoint on that. And my name is John Moore, and I'm a shamanic practitioner and teacher from Maine and the U.S. And yeah, let's get into COVID a little bit and talk about the pandemic. So, from a shamanic point of view, and I am speaking for myself because shamanic people are individuals. We all have different cultures. We come from different areas or different traditions, and so opinions will differ. But I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm going to give you my take, and I'm going to give you what has come out of shamanic work that I've done around COVID. So in the beginning, when things were really starting to go very badly in the United States, we lost quite a lot of people, and I do remember that there was a group of Mongolian shamans who performed a ceremony. I watched it live over live streaming. It was very interesting and cool, and it was a great thing for them to do. And they were doing it on behalf of the West, and particularly the U.S. at somebody's request. And they envisioned COVID as like this dragon that was flying over the U.S. And that's metaphorical, and they understand it as that, and it is hard because a disease is amorphic, right? It's not amorphic. It's it morphs, it changes, we have mutations that happen pretty frequently. And it's amorphous. That's the word I'm looking for. Amorphous, that it doesn't really have a shape. But in shamanism, the belief is that everything, particularly living things, but not particularly everything, has or is a spirit. Living things are spirits. And so a virus is a living thing and it has a spirit. Its spirit is a little challenging to understand. It's like saying the spirit of the community that you live in, because it's collective, right? Because individual parts of the virus are not necessarily connected within the same body, but they have an overarching spirit. And in this case, it's global, and it's morphing and changing and mutating, and there are all these variants and that sort of thing. And so I have journeyed to COVID. Shamanic journeying is the main practice of shamanism. It's, if you don't know, it's where we enter into an altered state. We travel in non-ordinary reality, and we work with helping spirits. And so I went to my helping spirits and I said, I want to see and experience and perhaps communicate with the spirit of COVID. And it was insightful. And I know people who have done this with other diseases, particularly Lyme disease, which is very, which is bad in this part of the world where I live. Lots and lots of people with Lyme. It's very, very difficult to treat, very, very difficult to diagnose. It frequently comes with co-infections, like other parasites come along with it, and people do die from it, and those who don't die from it have varying levels of incapacitation and other things that happen. So I journeyed to the spirit of COVID, and to see if I could communicate with it and see if I could get some understanding of what's going on. And when we think about a disease that is killing so many people around the world, we think it's horrible. It must be evil. It must be, that sort of thing. And that's very black and white thinking, and I understand that. And if you have had COVID and suffered from it, or have lost people due to COVID, and most people I know, including myself, have lost people we knew, or had people who got sick and are still suffering from symptoms of long COVID, and the disruption in our lives and all of those things. We might tend to think of a disease like that as evil because of the impact that it's created. And good and evil are challenging concepts, because is a tiger evil if it eats a person? It's doing what a tiger does, right, to survive. And diseases like viruses are doing what they do to survive, which is replicate and spread around and infect people's lungs. So they cough up, and other people inhale the disease, and so they reproduce, just like human beings do. And if you think about how human beings we've been around on this planet for I don't know, a million or so years, maybe less. There's a lot of debate about that, modern humans, when modern humans came about. But in the last 150 years or so, we have decimated this planet. And that is like the less than a blink of an eye in the history of the planet. We have decimated this planet. We have wiped out populations of animals. We have polluted our oceans with plastic. We have pumped tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And so we are very much acting like a virus. But the worst part about the way humans are acting is that we know it. We're conscious of it, and we know better. So, I did journey to the spirit of this virus, and to me, it appeared like this just swirling mass, almost like a flock of birds. And that makes sense to me. That's how my brain made sense to it. And I also understand how somebody might perceive that, and their consciousness kind of makes that into a dragon. We're pattern making machines. And so, when I communicated with this virus, I got information back, and I said, do you understand that you're killing so many people? And what came back was, well, that is never the intention. That's not the purpose. That's not why we do what we do. And it doesn't make sense for, it's actually not a great thing for a virus to kill its host, because it's less likely to survive and spread, and that sort of thing. So when we look at like Ebola outbreaks, for example, they tend to be very self-contained, because unfortunately they have a very high fatality rate. It's harder to transmit, but it has a very high fatality rate, and people pass away very quickly from Ebola. So it gives it less chance to replicate and spread. So organisms like viruses have this impulse to reproduce, just as we do. Impulse to reproduce and to live and to pass on. It's not a consciousness like we think of consciousness. There are many, many different types of consciousness out there. It's not like a virus is like, oh, I'm going to infect these people. No, it's just doing what it does, and not having the same understanding that people do about what we're doing to our planet. Where if you think of our planet as a host, and we are, killing off large parts of it, coral reefs and oceans, and the rainforests where our air gets cleaned and we get oxygen, and all of those things. It's a little understandable. This is not to take away from the suffering that COVID has caused. It has, but it's not the intention of COVID. My helping spirits tell me that COVID is with us, at least for the time being, but it is becoming more manageable. There will be variants that spike up and that are concerning, but we will get it under control, much like the seasonal flu, and there may be better vaccines for it coming out, and that sort of thing. But definitely better treatments for it, which are already starting to come out. And life is starting to come back to normal. I do think people are doing things a little prematurely, assuming that they can't still get sick from COVID and still spread it around. And we see it spiking in different areas of the world as I record this, which is in late March of 2022. I don't know when you're watching this. Things may be very different by then. And the future is never, in ordinary reality, the future is never set in stone. We can get an idea of where things are headed. The most probable the most probable place will wind up based on what's going on now, but we do have free will, and we can change direction and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to give you a little insight into my viewpoint. I did journey to the virus, the spirit of the virus, and which was very interesting. I love doing stuff like that where I'm getting some insight that I wouldn't normally have, in a perspective that I wouldn't normally have. And I do hope that we control this thing and learn to live with it without causing so many people to suffer. I do want to address one kind of aspect that has been disturbing for me all along, and that is the politicization. I have a hard time talking today. Politicization. Wow, of this pandemic. That has been a horrible thing. There's been divisive. People want to listen to talking heads and politicians over scientists and doctors who study these things. And then when the scientists and doctors who study these things differ from these political talking heads, it's they're evil, they're trying to steal from us, they're trying to kill us, they're trying to microchip us and track us, and all of those things. And it's all hogwash. It's all horse pucky. Okay? There is not a global conspiracy by every epidemiologist, every person I know. I am close friends with lots of people, and I have relatives that work in medicine, and having conversations with them, and knowing what they have gone through for 2 years. My cousin's wife is a nurse who has been treating COVID patients and in isolation, and the stuff that they go through, they are exhausted. They are absolutely exhausted. So my heart and my energy and my light and my love goes out to those healthcare workers who are still dealing with this. Yes, there are maybe fewer people hospitalized now and that sort of thing, but imagine dealing with your job nonstop for 2 years, and having it be as bad as it could possibly be. And that is what they have gone through. And, this lack of compassion that comes from people who are choosing sides. How do you choose sides in a pandemic? That's insanity. No, I'm not talking about clinical definitions of mental illness. I'm talking about insane attitudes that don't make any sense. And we need to come through this. And the message here from my helping spirits is, this is really pointing out, this is a strong lesson in how this divisiveness in the world is harming us as a species. We make everything about politics, everything from children's toys and commercials and books, and now human diseases and all of these things. We make everything political, and it's why we have warfare. It's why we have suffering, this division. And the lesson here is that if we're going to survive as a species, we really do need to come together. We need to come together and look and be concerned and compassionate for each other. There is this, again, it's this political underpinning where we shouldn't look out for other people, because if we do, we are going to have less. And that is not the truth at all. Yeah, some billionaires might not be able to afford that $600 million yacht with 2 helipads and an 80-foot swimming pool. But they're not suffering. But there are people who are really suffering out there. People in Ukraine, people who have been struck by the pandemic, people who have lost jobs and homes and all kinds of things. And we do need to take care of one another. That is the lesson here. And this is not, I'm not preaching a political ideology. I'm talking about being a human being with compassion and empathy for other human beings. That is not political. I'm sorry to say it. People will try to turn that into a political statement. Oh, that's, socialism or left wing or communism or right wing or whatever, middle of the road, whatever. No. Taking care of each other is human, and it is what we have done for most of the history of humankind. And if we had not, we would not have survived. Human beings only survived because we don't run fast, we don't have sharp fangs or sharp teeth, we're not good at climbing trees. We only survived due to cooperative hunting and our ability to make tools together. Only way human beings ever survived as a species. We need to go back to our roots. We need to go back and look at indigenous cultures that we came from. And I don't care if you are European, as my European ancestors have been in the US since the 17th century. But if I go back far enough, everybody was indigenous somewhere at some time. And we need to look back, even if it's 1,000 years or 2,000 years, and look at how we took care of each other back then. Not to say there wasn't warfare and human beings didn't do horrible things to one another. I'm not glossing things over in that way. But on a tribal level, on a hunter-gatherer level, we look at places like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which was built 10,000 years ago, supposedly by hunter-gatherer tribes. I don't know how that's possible, but I'm not an archaeologist. And it is huge and immense, and the amount of labor that would have had to go into it, and cooperation, because the labor also had to be supported by food and water. There's no water nearby that place. Do some research into it, look it up. It's very interesting. So the main lesson, I think, and we can take lessons from anywhere coming out of the pandemic, is to look back and see the ways that we did not behave well as a species, and look at the ways that we were doing us versus them things. We were othering people. We were dividing people politically. We were looking at people. One of the things that really, really bothers me is when we talk about people dying from COVID, there are people out there who say, well, those people had pre-existing conditions. So what? So what if those people had pre-existing conditions? My grandmother is 106 years old, and her life is just as important as yours, as are my friends who have type 1 diabetes, as are my friends who have asthma, as are my friends who have Lyme disease. Their lives mean as much as your lives, as my life. And it really bothered me to hear people say, well, those people had only people with pre-existing conditions die. Like they are less than. Like they are less deserving of survival, of human compassion. And so the justification was, I don't have to do anything because I don't have pre-existing conditions. And that was justification for people acting very irresponsibly. Sometimes, and there was a really famous case here where, during lockdown, people held a wedding and spread COVID out, and some of those people worked in a nursing home and killed a bunch of people in the nursing home. Those people were somebody's parents or grandparents or brothers and sisters or whatever, and they are not less deserving of life than anybody. So we need to get past that. We need to learn our lessons. And I'm sorry for being so somber and serious at the end of this, but that is the lesson. That is the lesson that Spirit has given me to deliver to you.